Evening Blaster peeps. Let's start off this video with short stroking and tappet timing explanations to the best of my abilities. So what I've done here is I've just got some random parts that I've had laying around. Yo Jackson, what's happening, brother? Yes, I've just had some random parts that we've had laying around. Adam, hopefully Nate's had a chance to play with Derek, I hope. Get back to the start. What is it? Short stroking and tappet timing. So what I've done here is I just grabbed some random parts that are laying around. I'm going to go and explain some of the few stages through the revolution of the sector gear in relation to the tappet, the piston, how it seals, when it seals, and how everything is integrated to each other. So the reason for this video is I've had of late a lot of the community, gel ball community, query me and ask questions on short stroking and where they should be taking teeth off and why and all that other lovely things. So let's start on why you would consider short stroking in the first place. Wipe that crap off, here we go. So if you start hearing really weird noises as your rate of fire jumps all over the place, then what's effectively can happen, and the cause of it is the pre-engagement. So what that means is the pickup tooth on the sector gear is rotating around and hitting the piston before the piston has finished its compression stroke. So the compression stroke is, let's get a better angle here, I always do this. Whoop. There we go. So the compression stroke is piston comes back, draws air through, and it's coming forward, compressing the air. Now, as it comes forward, before it finishes its travel all the way forward to start the suction stroke again, this sector gear is coming around and effectively, I'll get rid of some of this stuff. Effectively coming around. Ooh, let's reset that. There we go. Sector gears coming around and hitting. I've seen some of you guys come in hitting about the fourth or fifth tooth along. So it's coming forward, and then the sector gear is coming back and hitting the piston, which is making the piston bounce. How you can tell that is a few things. So you should see a lot of wear on the top of the tooth. Usually 1, 2, 3, 4 up along here. When you start seeing wear on the top of the tooth, that is, what's that question? I took the middle two off the sector and the most eastern tooth off the ladder. Why isn't it firing? I took the middle two off the sector. Reese, PM me, brother, send me some photos of what you've done. I can run you through what short stroking, or just watch the video and you can compare it to what you've done on your blaster, and hopefully it's the same. Hopefully you haven't done too much damage in respect of, because you've taken the middle two off the sector. If you've taken teeth off the middle of the sector, that is a no-no. Anyway, we'll run through this, and then PM me, Reese, and then we can run through it personally and go through what you've done. So, if you see markings on the top of the tooth, what effectively is happening is, as the piston's coming forward, the first tooth on the sector is catching it. So it's hitting it on the top of the teeth. Another good indication of premature engagement is, as Mike has put up on the community page, he's had a little GIF where people haven't shaved off the last tooth and it actually bounces the piston. So that's a really good piece of information as well, guys. So if you haven't watched it, by all means watch it. It saves me a little bit of explanation. But let's go through the right way of short stroking, and why. So if you're experiencing premature engagement, you would either, depending on how bad it is, so depending on how far down the rack or up the rack, depending on which way you want to look at it, you're getting that premature engagement. It will depend on how many teeth you take off. A good starting point is 2 teeth. So you take the 2 last teeth off the rack here, and a common question is, if I take the 2 teeth off the 2 last teeth off the rack, does that mean you take the last 2 teeth off the sector? No, it doesn't, because what you're effectively trying to do is buy more time for the piston to complete its compression stroke. If you take the last 2 teeth off the sector and you take the last 2 teeth off the rack, you're doing absolutely nothing. In the respect is, you'll get the piston to move quicker, but you'll also affect your tappet timing majorly, and I'll explain that through and why I've got a few little bits and pieces coloured on this sector gear, and I've made a drawing with a few explanations, and I've gone as deep as trying to work out percentages and distance in millimeters and how it affects it. Oh, no worries, Tristan, man. Always happy to help, you know. Pick up side of the sector, release side of piston. Okay, yeah, sweet. Yeah, always happy to help. You know, you guys know that. So, you know, if you guys got any questions, I'll post them up. I'll try and answer them after the video. But let's get through this and we'll go from there. So you match how many teeth you take off the rack to how many teeth you take off the front of the sector gear. So effectively what's happening is, if let's just say you take 2 teeth off the rack and you take 2 teeth off the sector gear, your pickup point will now be there. So it'll go through its cycle and it'll stop. Oop, I've jumped a tooth, sorry. Let's get that back 1 tooth. Something like that. Still there. So now your release point will be there, and you can see how I've made a little dot on the piston. So what we've effectively done is we've reduced the amount of cylinder capacity we've used as opposed to a full cylinder, and that will affect your FPS. But what this will also do is increase your rate of fire, because the piston is now moving a lot quicker. So you're able to, and your gear set is, well, not the gear set's moving quicker, but the operation of the piston's moving quicker. So you'll get a higher rate of fire, not by much. I think I was talking to Lockie from GBA, and he was saying something around like 1.5 degrees or something like that per tooth. So your release point is now, well, let me set this all back up. So your release point is now there, and as the piston comes back around, so you're releasing it sooner and you're buying it more time by cutting off the 2 front teeth. So you should be able to complete your cycle and get the sector to finish its, or just to rotate and start the next pickup cycle like so. This is so difficult, and hopefully that should fix your pre-engagement issues. If it doesn't, then take another tooth off. Me personally, I'm not a fan of short stroking, because it does decrease the capacity of the cylinder that you're using. Advantage, or not advantage, reasons to short stroke. One would be if the spring compression length is too long and you get the piston jamming. So there's, some people have messaged me saying, why is my piston jamming? You know, could it be the battery? Is the motor not strong enough? They're all very viable reasons as to why it would jam. Another viable reason is the complete length of the spring, fully compressed is too long, and it's not giving enough travel to the piston to cycle properly. So to rectify that, you can cut off a tooth or 1 or 2 teeth, and then that'll decrease the travel of the piston, or decrease the distance of the travel of the piston, which will allow it to then the sector gear to release, and it should operate accordingly. What I've found a fix for that is, because I'm an advocate for trying to use as much percentage of the cylinder as possible, is mimicking what you do for AOE at the front, mimic it at the rear. So I'll cut off half a tooth here, and I'll cut off a third of the tooth there. So you are losing a little bit of cylinder percentage, but not as much as cutting 2 teeth off. And I'll explain all of that in numbers with something I've drawn up for you guys, and why we've drawn on this as well. So they're the reasons to short stroke, and what teeth to take off when you do want a short stroke. So it's the opposite. So if you're taking teeth off the back of the rack, you take teeth off the front of the sector gear. So you're changing the timing point in which the sector gear will pick up on your pickup tooth. If you shave the last tooth on the rack and shave the last tooth on the sector gear, it's going to change your tappet timing significantly, because which will become more apparent when I show you guys this diagram, because your pickup cycle will be the same. It'll come through, and then your release cycle is effectively there, because you've shaved off those two and you've shaved off those two. So your active tooth your last tooth is there, and your last tooth on your rack is there. As it comes through, whoop, sorry guys. As it comes through to release, that's its release point. So if we imagine now everything's moving and doing its thing, you're still going to have an issue of pre-engagement. You're not buying any time whatsoever in regards to the time it will take the piston to travel its full length and compression, as opposed to the time it takes for this first pickup tooth to cycle back around to pick it back up. Now, the reason I have marked this sector is to show you some different positions on when things are activated, or and what I mean by activated is when, like, the tappet plate is picked up, when the piston is picked up, when the tappet plate is released, and when the piston is released, and that'll give you sort of time frames on how everything is operated. So that is everything at its resting point. As the sector rotates, we come back around that point there, and I've used 12 o'clock as a reference. So that point there, we've got the post as now touching the tappet plate. So at that point, that's when the tappet plate is going to be activated. It is going to break the seal on your T-piece. And if we remove that, just, whoop, as you can see, that purple mark is when, at 12, using 12 o'clock as a reference, is when on this, the tappet plate is activated. So this purple mark here is the cycle of your tappet plate in regards to using 12 o'clock as a reference. So if we put this back on, boop, here we go. So tappet plate activation, moves back around. As you can see, let's follow the purple marks here. Scroll around, put a little bit of pressure here, and then tappet plate released. Now you can see that there's a little bit of a purple mark here. So at that point, tappet plate is released, and as it scrolls back around, you probably got about one or two teeth before it actually seals back up against the T-piece. So the distance between here, where the tappet plate is picked up, and back around to here where the tappet plate is released, that's the time it takes to activate that tappet plate. You probably find that when it actually seals, you got a tooth and a half when it actually seals. So I almost got, well, I'd say 50-60% of this cycle is taken up by the tappet plate travel, from sealing, opening to sealing again. So if we backtrack and take in mind what's happening with the piston, which is, I've coloured in there red. So we scroll back around. So at that point there, we've activated the piston. Oh, let's take the tappet plate off so you guys can see it. So right there is when we've activated the piston. That red mark there, using 12 o'clock as a reference, effectively is there. So piston is picked up. We've cycled through. Cycle, cycle, cycle. And then at that point there, whoop, So at that point there is when the piston will be released. So effectively between where the piston is released and then the tappet plate, the seal on the nozzle is cracked due to the tappet plate activation, is very little time whatsoever. And you can imagine if these are spinning, or the motor, let's say you got a high torque motor, Red Chi High, 35,000 RPM, doing 25 rounds a second. So this every second, 25 rounds a second, this is rotating 25 times per second. So the amount of time it takes to get from here to there is nothing. Absolutely nothing. So we do need things to move very, very quickly. This dictates how quick this piston has to move and complete its compression stroke before the seal is cracked on the T-piece. So with that explained, so we've got tappet plate activation, tappet plate duration, that's when the tappet plate is open, to tappet plate closed, as opposed to piston pickup or piston activation, piston duration, and piston closed. So if you guys can wrap your head around that, is this a Gen 8 box? Oh, John, I think this is actually a Wells plastic crappy box that I've had laying around. It's actually broken. Broke off the post here. I literally just picked up whatever parts I had laying around just to do a quick demonstration. So if you guys can wrap your head around what's happening in regards to duration and how much time of the cycle where everything is activated and how little time we have to complete the compression stroke, then when we move over to this this diagram, we should have you guys should be able to wrap your head around it, and it should explain it a bit better. So, little diagram that I drew up. See if I can get. Whoop. A little bit of technical difficulties. Sorry guys, let's see if I can move this around a bit better. Here we go, that's a bit better. So as you can see here we go. So this is the distance it takes for the piston to complete its compression stroke before the pickup of the tappet plate or the seal on the nozzle and the T-piece is broken. This here, black mark, is what ends up happening is this is the pickup of the piston. So premature engagement is that the compression stroke is traveling past the pickup of the piston, and we're engaging this part here. The black part is pre-engagement. So we're trying to decrease that. So we're trying to give it as much time as possible for the piston to finish its compression stroke before the pickup of the piston. So let's start here where we had before. Pickup of the tappet plate. You got the duration of the tappet plate. You got tappet plate is released, and then it's the duration it takes for the tappet plate to be released to seal. So pretty much almost 50% of the rotation is tappet plate movement. Then you have pickup of the piston, duration of the piston's travel, release of the piston, and then you've only got this amount of rotation and or time before the piston has to finish its compression stroke before you start losing FPS. So between this point and this point, if you haven't finished your compression stroke, you're losing FPS because you've broken your seal. So what we're trying to do is buy more time for the piston to finish to do its thing, to finish its compression stroke before it actually gets picked up. So if we're able to cut off two teeth at the front of the sector gear, then we're shifting the pickup of the piston from here to there. So that's your short stroke pickup. So we're now buying extra time. It'll also release the piston and give you more time for it to do its thing. You can also effectively get the piston to move quicker by using a bigger spring. So more force up against the piston will increase velocity, but that'll increase FPS, and if you're having issues like trying to meet field limits, then upping the spring might not be the best way to solve your issue in regards to pre-engagement. What else? Oh, now the reason why short stroking helps, or the reason why short stroking works, is because the distance traveled. So that's a normal distance traveled to the piston. And that is a 1-to-1 scale. So from the setup that I showed before, I think it's 70 mil the piston travels back. So from resting position to full travel is 70 mil. When we short stroke it, it's now 60 mil. So by short stroking 2 teeth, we've knocked off 15% of travel. So 100% travel, 85% travel. As that relates into millimeters traveled, so a full cycle of the sector gear is 94.25 mil. The full cycle of the sector gear in regards to where it picks up the piston to where it releases the piston is 61.26 mil. When you short stroke it, you are taking 50%, or you're taking that little percentage away from it. So the distance traveled in regards to picking up the piston to releasing the piston is now half. So you got 47.15 mil. You've effectively gained 14.11 mil in regards to where the pickup of the piston is, as opposed to normal. Short stroking 2 teeth, you've gained that much amount of travel, or that much amount of rotational travel of the sector gear. What else can I explain on this? You will lose a little bit of FPS. You will gain a little bit of rate of fire. You can up the spring rate. You can also do this if you experience premature engagement and you do short stroke it, and then you can then use a bigger spring. You can also opt to do porting. So port the cylinder, so you're decreasing once again the volume of the cylinder to drop FPS. There are a lot of ways on modding different parts to get back to, say, field limitations. If everyone's running 300 FPS, which seems to be the magic number these days, then you can get away with short stroking, bring down your FPS, increase your rate of fire, decrease the premature engagement. Increase the spring will also help with piston speed, because the bigger spring will increase the velocity of the piston, so it'll move the piston quicker, allowing the piston to complete its compression stroke between release of the piston to the cracking of the seal or the nozzle movement. And then if you still find that you've now fixed your pre-engagement issues by short stroking, you've used a bigger spring to increase the speed of the piston, and you still find you're a little bit over your FPS, then you can port your cylinder, and then that'll bleed off a little bit more of the percentage of the cylinder that you're using, which should drop your FPS back down, and you can increase your port, 80%, 75%, however big you want to make it, and then until you get your desired FPS. So where people will find major issues in regards to pre-engagement is using high-speed gears, clearly, because the speed of your sector gear is just increased significantly, and the piston will only move as quick as the spring will allow it. Same with the tappet plate, will only move as quick as the return spring will allow it. So you can increase, if you do high-speed gear, increase your spring rate to get the piston to move quicker. You can short stroke it. You can then port it to then tune your FPS, and that should solve most of your issues in getting to hit a specific FPS range and avoid pre-engagement. Another thing I do highly recommend is using a heavy-duty tappet return spring and then shortening it again. The reason being is I'm a heavy believer that the less time that you can, the more you can decrease the duration of when the tappet is released, of when the tappet is released, the time it takes for it to reseal again. By using a heavy duty spring and then shortening it, you should be able to shorten that distance shorten that time frame once again. Now this is a little bit deceptive in the respect that it looks like there's a lot of time from when it seals to when it lets the piston go. I was meant to sit down and do some calculations in regards to what type of time frames we are working with between this point and that point, from this point to that point, and then what the actual time will be that you are gaining by changing your pickup of the piston from here to there. We're talking, tenths of a second, maybe even quicker than that. If we're looking at 25 rounds a second, so this gear rotates 25 times every second. You can imagine how fast that is. So to distance from here to here, it happens a blink of an eye. So distance covered also. So like even from pickup to release of the piston, which is 61.26 millimeters, if this is rotating 25 times a second, it would cover that distance. Look, I'll actually sit down and make the calculation so that I'm not making an absolute fool of myself, just to give you guys a good reference on the actual time it takes for everything to open and close, and the actual time it is required that the speeds that everything needs to move at to ensure that you got great sealing, the compression is finishing within this amount of time frame, and how quick that tappet is moving back and forth just in that time frame, and how your piston is moving back and forth obviously in that time frame. So what I'll do is, once I finish up with this video, I might sit down with the calculator and just calculate how in what percentage of milliseconds we're working with, or tenths of a second, hundredths of a second, that everything is opening and closing. Hopefully that'll give you guys a better idea of just what we're dealing with here and why we need to do a lot of these things to get these blasters working as efficiently as possible. So, one that doesn't know gear ratio. Okay, so Jonathan, gear ratios, really simple. I explained it to one of the community members recently, but I'll explain it to you guys here while I've got your attention. So if we've got an 18-to-1 gear set, which is your standard gear set, that means the pinion gear, or the gear on the motor, rotates 18 times. Here we go, 18 times. So we'll say pinion rotates 18 times for every one time the piston moves. So, do I have a motor hanging around? Nope, I don't have a motor, which is weird. Alright, we're back. So the pinion gear on the top of your motor will rotate 18 times for every time this piston does this. Back, forth, that's one. So we can calculate your rate of fire if we know... Where's my pen? Here we go, sorry. We can calculate your rate of fire if we know the RPM at which your pinion gear is rotating. Under your desk. Yeah, I actually checked under my desk, Caden. I really did. And I don't have anything stuck to any of the legs. That's where I put all my motors. I was like, yeah, flailing around under the desk and I couldn't find anything. So if we have... What do we got here? Let's just say Red Chi operates at 35,000 RPM at 8.4 volts. I think they're rated for on their spec list. So we know the pinion at 18-to-1. Well, first of all, let's go. Let's calculate that to rounds per second. So it'll be 35,000 divided by 60. So 35, 1, 2, 3 divided by 60. That gives us 583, sorry, 583.33 rounds per second. So now that we've converted it to rounds per second, we then know that the pinion is rotating in this gear set 18 times. So we can go 583.33 rounds per second divided by 18. And that's 32.41 is your rate of fire. Now that's at 100% efficiency. So that's not taking into consideration friction. That's not taking into consideration, battery life, motor efficiency, or anything like that. At 100% efficiency, at 18 to 1, where your motor is traveling. We're 18 to 1, where your motor is traveling 35,000 revolutions per minute at 8.4 volts. You are going to get 32.41 rounds per second. So that's your rate of fire. Now, in an 8.4, well, not too many people, well, no one runs an 8.4, but I also find that if we allocate 15% efficiency loss, brings it back down to 28.18 is your rate of fire, and effectively that setup will get you that. So you're always around anywhere between sort of 26 to 28 rounds per second. It's pretty, well, not pretty weird, but I've found that a 15% efficiency loss is what you will get at any one point. But on the same token, if you're running an 11 volt in this system, then you negate that 15% loss, and you'll actually get around the 32 rounds per second at 11 volt. I'm so close again. Oh, was all right then. So, yeah, it's really good when you can get the spec list of what your motor is doing, and if you do this quick calculation, then you can roughly expect to get these numbers. 15% loss in efficiency from that number if you're running an 8.4 volt system, and actually when people do run the 7 volts, they when they run the 11 volts, they usually get that 30. I find I get 32 rounds a second. So we sort of take up that 15% loss in efficiency just by jumping to an 11 volt. And standard gears, will that kill my motor? So Jonathan, I currently have a standard motor, 11.1 volt battery, and standard gears. Will that kill my motor? Now, if you're saying standard gears, as in respect that it's nylon, in my experience, you will destroy the nylon gears before you destroy the motor. The motors, once you're sort of talking at, because they're rated usually 8.4 volts. I don't know why, but I find that 8.4 volts is what they always rate them at. Or what they test them at. By jumping it to 11 volts, it's really not that much more strain on the system. It is a lot of strain on your nylon gears. But by jumping from 7 volt to 14 volt, I find that your gears are the ones that fail before your motor will fail. And I should be fine. Nice. What else have we got? Standard. Booyah. So, Elliot, what gear ratio do I recommend for a purple Chi-Hi? Look, the purple Chi-Hi is a high-speed motor. There's not really that many advantages in running a high-speed motor in our gel blasters. What I mean by that is So the way I look at a build when I build my blasters for customers or for myself, for mates or whoever I'm building for, is I look at the motor. Your motor is your powerhouse. So i.e. you do want a torquey motor because that is what is going to dictate what type of spring you're going to pull. Where I get my speed from is my gear ratios. So 18 to 1, 16 to 1, 13 to 1, 12 to 1s, your DSGs, 9 to 1s, the RPM DSG, which is a 6 to 1. So that's where we're going to get our rate of fire. So when people, they use an 18 to 1 with a purple chi high, it brings a few elements in, or it brings a few things into play, which is increases your chance of premature engagement because the gears are moving so fast. Now, one solution to fixing that is upping the spring rate. But then if you up the spring rate, you're going to put a lot of stress on your high-speed motor because it's not a torquing motor. So you take that out of your arsenal, then you go, all right, the only thing that I really can do is short stroke it. So then you short stroke it, but then that'll increase the rate of fire again, which will increase, heat the heat. It'll increase heat in your gearbox because everything's moving so much more quicker. And the motor's already moving so quick already, so you're battling an uphill battle in regards to heat. Whereas if you drop back down to a torquey motor, so the motor is not working as hard to pull the bigger springs or to pull any spring really, and so your heat becomes less, though the heat dissipation becomes less. I mean, the heat created is less because the motor's not overworking itself. The best way that I can explain this is if I asked you to run up a hill and back down 10 times, you could relatively do that if you're relatively fit, even if you're not. Look, I'm not the smallest guy in the world if anyone's ever met me. Running up and down a hill would probably, tire me out significantly, but I'd still be able to do it at a certain amount of time. So now, then ask me to do exactly the same thing with a 10 kilo pack on my back. Obviously, it's going to take me a lot longer. Obviously, I'm going to be a lot more exhausted at the end of the running up and down this hill 10 times. It's because, my body isn't, everyone will struggle with extra weight. But if you do a lot of training and, you become more adaptive to moving that weight, i.e. you're designed as a torquey motor per se, then you can do that easy. So what is the best motor to buy? It all depends on your price range, man. We use a lot of different motors. So we've got a couple Starways, the CNC Infinity, I highly rate them. In regards to what's available locally, we've got, a few motors on the way. The Satan motor, if you can get your hands on one of them, that is a really, really good motor. So the GNP M180, I do believe, M180 Satan. Your Infinities, they seem to be available locally. If you don't have that much coin and you don't want to be dropping bulk amount of money on a motor, then, you can't go past a Red Chi High. When you do streaming, gotta... Oh, alright. So best motor for 12 to 1, gotta go high torque, man. Have to do high torque. You got your speed from your 12 to 1 gears. That's not going to be an issue. What your issue is going to be is utilizing big springs to get that piston to move quicker. So ASG, yeah, hell yeah, ASG. But yeah, you just need a really strong torquey motor to move that spring so that that piston can return back to its seating position and complete its compression stroke as quick as possible. Wow. Okay, you guys have got me for about another 5 minutes and then I've got to cruise. What else have we got? Because that's all I can afford. What do we got? Okay, so 32 to 1 and purple chi high with heavy spring versus 12 to 1 and torque motor lighter spring. No. Wrong combination, Darren. So 32 to 1 and purple chi high with a lighter spring. The 12 to 1 and a torquey motor with a bigger spring. So the torquing motor will be able to pull the bigger spring. The high speed motor won't be able to pull the heavier spring. I empathize that the 32-to-1 gears will help out in regards to gearing and getting some torque down. I'm a mechanic, so getting some torque down to the ground, getting some torque to allow that piston to move back and forth. I'm only going off theories in my head at the moment. Why I say that is I have not done a 32-to-1 build. I'd love to do one. But I've just been chasing down this rate of fire. I've just been chasing down, just getting a lot of theories in that respect down pat, which we should be pretty much, hopefully done. And then I'm able to move on to stuff like a 32-to-1 with a high speed, and then double check all the springs and see how they all interact with each other with the high torque gear set. Things like DMR, people are starting to do a lot of DMR builds, or say they're doing DMR style builds. So that seems to be the new in thing at the minute, which is definitely something that we're all also working on. But we're trying to actually provide a true DMR to the gel ball industry or the gel ball community. What I mean by that is we're changing the platform in what we're using. That's about as much as I can say without giving too much away. What else? Maybe Purple will pull a 150 at 18-to-1. What's the heat like, Reese? Because I got a Purple Cheer High at an 18-to-1 pulling, what was it? What did we pull in the HK? Yeah, it was probably a 130, 140. And yeah, the heat generated in that grip was significant. Like, I'm not saying it's not going to do it. What I'm saying is that you're going to be battling the heat created from it because you're working that motor. I've had a standard vector motor pull an M190, but for how long? And the heat generated from that, and we're talking about reliability versus performance. I'm sure you can get most motors to pull M190s, but for how long? Do you want it to last a mag, or do you want it to last a year? So it's always a playoff between performance, reliability, and money. Obviously, it's anything that you're building mechanically. It always boils down to those three things. This was extremely good, informative vid. Oh yeah, thank you very much, Jonathan. I do try and see what you guys are always asking about. I do try and post up videos and how-tos and tips, and try and make it as simple as possible. So I'm always happy to help you guys out. You guys help us out by spreading the word, and a lot of our community members message me privately, which I do. I always extend to everybody, but new information that's out there, I'm always happy when people come across and say, hey man, have you come across this? And I'm like, nah, I haven't. Link me. I always say link me, and they shoot through links, and I'm able to keep on top of everything. I'm able to keep my finger on the pulse. So you guys give to me, more than happy to give back. Maybe back-to-back comparison. Yeah, Darren, definitely. Back-to-back comparison is the only way to do it. So we're doing all these high-speed gear ratios with high-torque motors. It's about time that I stretch out and go to like a high-torque gear ratio with the high-speed motor and see what type of springs it will take. See what type of heat we're dealing with. Seeing what type of range, accuracy. It could be the answer. It could blow my mind. It's something that I haven't done yet. So, definitely something that I definitely want to move forward and do. Alright guys, I gotta get going. It's getting late. It's 8 o'clock. Thank you very much for all your support. By all means, keep them posting up. Keep them PMs coming. Keep those questions coming. Keep me on my toes. Keep me on my feet. Love this industry. Love the community that we're building at RPM. Share, like, invite your friends, and like I said, PM me. My door's always open. Any questions you guys got whatsoever, if I find that there's going to be multiple people that are having all these issues, then boom, I'll put up a post so that the information gets out there. Also, I always say, if I've got something wrong, comment. Tell me I'm wrong. I'm more than happy to sit down and have a what's the word I'm looking for? a civilized conversation with everybody that's out there, considering what I've seen on other communities and a lot of bumping of heads. That's something that I don't enjoy, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out here that don't enjoy seeing and or being part of that, but I'm more than happy to sit down and have a civilized conversation with any one of you guys, and talk gel blasters. We'll talk theories, we'll talk tech, we'll talk whatever the hell you want, just as long as it's amicable. So, yep, I'm running late. I've got to get going. So, thank you very much, boys. Have fun. Always is something we're going to start pushing from this point onwards. Not that we didn't want to push, but we're going to make it a lot more evident. Is transport your blasters responsibly. Wear protective equipment. Make sure your eyes are covered when you're playing with these blasters. We don't want any more bad press. We want to try and portray a positive industry, a positive hobby where anyone from the little kids all the way up to older guys. I'm starting to get a little bit old myself. We portray that we're a responsible industry, we're a responsible hobby. So transport your blasters appropriately, keep them covered, keep them in appropriate cases. Even if you go to a venue and you have to walk 10 meters to the venue, don't have it strapped over your shoulder. Keep it in a case, keep it covered. Get to the venue. Once you're at the venue, then go hard, show everyone what you got, pull it out. Play hard, play fair. Play fair, guys. Let's keep this industry and hobby going. Always, man. I'm open, as you can see. Whatever. People message me all the time. Don't be shy. I've always said, if you're sitting up looking at your ceiling at 2 a.m. in the morning thinking about blasters, I'm either doing one or two things. I'm either fixing blasters at 2 a.m. or I'm doing exactly what you're doing, looking at it up the ceiling, wondering how I can better this industry and better this hobby. So don't be scared, guys. Don't be shy. Hit me up anytime. Thank you very much. And look forward to hearing from you guys in the future.